Okay, in this week's Weather Extra, we're going to celebrate how this winter has gone, and we're going to try and put some context on it. What does this spectacular start to winter mean for what the rest of winter might look like? To begin with, here's what it looks like in the Sierra right now. The Central Sierra Snow Lab up near Donner Pass. UC Berkeley's been running this for a very long time, and they've got lengthy records on what the snow should look like throughout the course of a winter. Looks great now. In fact, this is about 300% of average for this point in the year. That's a great story. But let's gain some perspective on this. We're going to put this on the chart, and we can use the records out at the Central Sierra Snow Lab to take a look at how snow in that part of the Sierra typically plays out. The chart on here starts on October 4th, and it goes all the way to the end of December. We're going to look at the entire year in a second. But first, let me just show you where we are. That black line right there shows you the big spike that we got. That brings us up to about our 300% of average for this point in the year. It's small, but there's a black line there. So that's good. Here's where we were last year. This is what it would have looked like for the snow year that they would have considered the 2022 year, because we're considering this one 2023. It won't be done until we finish and get into 2023. That's last winter. Look what happened. We're already ahead of where we were last year. But last year, it took off, and we had a near record-setting December snowfall. It really spiked, but then it just flatlined. And the line didn't really do much of anything from there all the way through the rest of the year. So we got a bit of a head fake last year, just going from this chart. We started out wonderfully with a near record-setting December snowfall, and then as you can see from the line right there, that pink line, it flatlined, and it pretty much bottomed out, and we had a pretty subpar year for snow. If you take a look at the green line there, that's actually average. So it looks great now. We started out great this year for the 2023. But as we know, things can change. We've had a pretty exaggerated pattern in the Pacific over the past week and a half. There's a huge arcing ridge of high pressure out here in the Pacific. That's been driving the storm track in very unique ways, and you can see it's been bringing the cold air our way. On the flip side, it's been breaking records in Alaska. That big ridge of high pressure has been setting records for daytime highs in early December in the state of Alaska. And this pattern has been locked for about the first week and a half of December. You've got an area of low pressure here, and then you've got a blocking ridge of high pressure on either side of it. That's a very familiar pattern when you get that set up. And in addition to breaking records for warmth in Alaska, which you can see the temperature anomalies here, it has also redirected the storm track for us for these first 2 weeks. And if we averaged out the first 2 weeks of December, you can actually see that pattern. We've had a pretty consistent area of low pressure here for about 2 weeks in a very favorable place for us to get storms here in California with blocking areas of high pressure on either side. That's not random. That's a well-known pattern. This is actually something called the Pacific North America pattern, which goes through different phases, and we can track this. And when it goes into something we call the negative phase, it can either be negative or positive. When it goes into the negative phase, that's good for storms here in California. That's what the negative phase looks like. That's exactly what our current pressure pattern in the Pacific looks like, that area of low pressure with 2 areas of high pressure blocking it. We've been in this negative phase of the Pacific North America pattern now for the first half of December. You can actually see it when you plot it on a graph. The line shows you whether we're in the positive phase or the negative phase. And this goes all the way back to August. We don't care about August, September, October. We're not in the winter. It's not going to have a big impact there. But when we got into November, we went into the negative phase. And you might remember, we had some good storms come through here in November. And the atmosphere was pretty locked into the pattern that favors the negative side of the Pacific North America pattern. Things quieted in the middle of November, and then in early December, the storm track came back, and sure enough, we find ourselves looking back at the negative phase of that Pacific North America pattern. So the question is, how long is it going to stay here? Well, we can use high-resolution forecasts to give us a good idea. The red spaghetti plot lines over there are the ensembles, so we don't look at just one, we look at a bunch, and that way we can build our confidence on it. The bottom line is, they're clearly showing us we're about to come out of the negative phase, which means we'll either go neutral or positive. And if you just looked at that, we're likely going to start turning off the storm track a little bit. That's in the short term. That's like second half of December. And a lot of the long-range forecasts that take us out through the end of December are in agreement it's going to start to get fairly quiet. We can go one step further in answering this question. What's the rest of winter going to look like? This is the long-range forecasts for precipitation anomalies, specifically for January, February, and March. Do you see up there where it says 2023 JFM? These are the climate forecast tools that do seasonal forecasts, specifically for January, February, and March. And this forecast has been consistent all winter long. And it's not the prettiest thing to look at, because if you look at the big red bullseye out here, factoring in all things like La Nina, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, these are much larger driving factors than just that North America Pacific oscillation we were looking at earlier. When you put it all together, the odds favor, unfortunately, January, February, and March, still coming in below average. So on that note, let's go back to the Central Sierra Snow Lab for a moment. We're at 300% of snow right now as of the middle of December. We were way above that at the end of last December, and it looked great, and we got our hopes up that maybe this means the whole winter's going to be great, and then it turned off. Doesn't mean it has to turn off this year, but obviously the question is going to be asked. Hey, we're doing really good now. What's this mean for the rest of winter? It's impossible to say for certain, but if you wanted to look at the tools we have, the odds favor it not necessarily staying this way. That's this week's Weather Extra. Paul Hagen will be in next week with another one.